Okay, let's go ahead and get started. John, take it away.
All right, thanks so much, Crystal. Thank you, everybody, for attending. For those who had to adjust their calendar due to the date change way back for this webinar, thank you so much for doing that, and we really appreciate your time and patience. And today I'll be covering conjoint analysis and MaxDiff exercises, so two discrete choice models. And what's so important about these? Well, there are two research approaches that, sometimes the products and the services that you offer, they may not fully reflect customer preference. And there could be a lot of opportunity to optimize these goods, and what these two advanced analytical research techniques do is that they'll help you measure those determinations. Especially in the case when a given product or service, or in the case of a given product or service, certain factors or attributes are just going to weigh more heavily than others do, at least according to the perspective of your audience. So that's what these models do. That's what conjoint and MaxDiff will do, is that they're techniques that are able to measure and compare those things. And big picture, help you understand what help you better understand your customers' preferences or what they value in the products and services that they purchase from you. So that's what we're going to cover today. Is we're going to give you an understanding of what MaxDiff is, as well as what is conjoint analysis, how they're similar, how they're different, and we'll definitely I'll guide you through the way through best practices as well. And then towards the end, I will give you a product demo through QuestionPro, as well as provide you with product enhancements that we've just implemented into the product that are in Q&A and will be active for us within the next month. So thank you again for joining, and let's get started. So we'll cover MaxDiff first. So what is MaxDiff? Well, it's short for maximum difference scaling. It's also known as best-worst scaling, but it's basically what it is. Basically, is it's an approach for obtaining preference or importance, and it's measured in scores across multiple items. Granted, in the case of MaxDiff exercises, you want to compare items that are similar to each other. So this exercise, you want to make sure that you're comparing items within the same categories, like fruits and vegetables, or locations, or things like that, like tourist locations, anything like that. And the way this exercise works is that respondents will see a set of options, or as we like to call items, 2 to 6 items at a time. Each of these exercises are called tasks, and they can be repeated to a certain number of times that you'd like. And they're asked to indicate which option is the best and as well as which is the worst of the 2 to 6 items that you see. And then you can repeat that exercise, or as I mentioned, they're called tasks. And each task will show you a different set of concepts or items. And what they do is narrow down the traits that the customer finds most important in a product, as well as least important. And what's cool about this is that it's different from asking standard one-off questions, like scaled questions asking about overall appeal towards an item or an attribute that makes an item. This is something more engaging for respondents to participate in. And while it's good to use scaled questions for granularity's sake, they can sometimes create biased metrics just due to cultural difference and due to the fact that, you can look at scaled response options and look at them in a very arbitrary way. These scaled questions and defining, sorry about that. In addition to, to avoiding these biases, you're going to get refined and discriminating results, which will allow you to, basically the data will be more easily readable in terms of understanding, what your customers value, what they prefer. And you can also find data and you can also distinguish data among subsegments along the way, as well as create new subsegments along the way. So the end result would be this. You have an ordered list with interval scaled utility scores for each item. Each item representing a relative importance. And what these scores indicate exactly is how much unique value each item has, and that can be presented, and these scores are presented in a ratio scaled probabilities. So for example, if one item has a utility score of 6, that item is 2 times greater than another item that had a score of 3. And so, and what that does big picture is you're accomplishing the business objective of understanding how your consumers are understanding consumer preferences toward a list of items, features, benefits, messaging, like ad messaging, things like that. And MaxDiff can be applied all over. Most commonly, the most common way that MaxDiff is applied is across product features. Typically, the most important, this can be applied in the tech industry, or if you're working in services industry or in consumer goods. That's just to name a few. Those are just examples of running products and services. But you can also do message testing. It isn't always about just the product and the service, but it's also about the message that you craft. You want to make sure that it resonates to your customers or to your market, as well as align, and you can test these messages to see, for the most part, what aligns with core brand values and just customer preferences. And then there's brand preference and evaluation. That's if you want to determine what aspects of your brand a customer finds to be most important or least important. So it's a bit more of an indirect approach where you're not providing a list of different items and seeing what they like or dislike, but more of you're getting more a sense of what is it that your customers value, and then you can, and then your products and services can be built off that or reflected on that. And then lastly, you can focus on customer satisfaction. This too is a bit more indirect, and that would just focus on the attributes that make a product rather than focusing on the product and service itself. And just like with brand preference and evaluation, there's no mention of upcoming products. It's just more of an understanding what attributes or what factors determine happiness for your customers, whether it's in the purchase decisions that they make, or it could reflect their lifestyles. It could reflect like psychographic information about them, things like that. So now we move over to conjoint analysis. And very similar to MaxDiff, but a little bit more complex than MaxDiff because there are going to be more dimensions involved. The way it works is, this is an exercise that lays out, rather than comparing individual items across each other, you're laying out and comparing different products or services that contain multiple different attributes, or contain items across an array of attributes. So you can be comparing a product and taking into consideration the brand it was built from, the price, the size of it, what key features it has, things like that. So unlike MaxDiff exercises in which you're selecting the most and least preferred option among a list of items that fall under the same umbrella or the same attribute, for example, like what are your favorite, between these different flavors of sparkling water, what's your most and least preferred? Conjoint analysis helps determine how people value different attributes, whether they be features, functions, benefits, anything like that would make up an individual product or service. And then respondents choose, which product or service is best fit for their needs. What's the best set of attributes in one, basically, and it's basically a simulation for consumers to evaluate or trade off the different characteristics that each product or service option provides, and then they get to decide what's most important. So how this exercise works basically is respondents will see a list of different attributes, each attribute, or a list of products, each with attributes describing what they represent, and then respondents get to basically choose what's most appealing to them. First the researcher breaks down all the different components, and then the respondents will then get to choose, just like with MaxDiff, the task repeats, and you will see a different set of concepts with a different set of attributes and items involved. And so the varying features, think of like the varying features being the independent variable and the preferred concepts or the preferred products and services by these respondents or by your target audience represent the dependent variable. And as far as setting that up, that would be a lot. I mean, a lot of it would be based on the variations that you want to test for each attribute, as well as how many times, as well as the total questions that you want your respondents to view. And the system or the platform will take care of the rest. So the end result in conjoint analysis is that once all the evaluations are compiled, each product and service, each possible combination of attributes that make a product or service will be provided with a unique value, and that will determine for each feature if each feature has potential to be sold on the marketplace or not. And also what it does is break out all the different attributes and allows you to understand among your customers what attributes are valued higher than others. And in big picture, what it does is it fulfills the business objective of understanding and measuring, how customers value individual components of a service, but it also allows you to optimize the offering of the product and the service that you can offer, just based on, what special features it offers, at what cost, things like that. And so what are the examples of how conjoint analysis can be applied? Well, you can do, designs for new products or new prodigy products or a new product line extension. So it's like, again, taking enhancements, price, size, branding, all those considerations, taking all of those factors into consideration. Also, too, you can estimate brand equity. Obviously critical for many managers to understand that, and brand equity goes directly to the bottom line, and it goes hand in hand with other factors like pricing. So you can measure price sensitivity as well, across different brands or across different products. Like for example, like TV, what means more to consumers? The brands. The brand that they see on the TV, the size of the TV, or the price tag. And we'll go in later on in this webinar, I'll show you, I'll provide you with an example during the demo of how that we could, how we run that analysis. And then lastly, there's branding and packaging. Design matters. And what's cool about, conjoint is it wouldn't just, you don't have to use terminology or words. You could also include designs as well. And I'll be able to show you how we do that at QuestionPro. Sort of how in the sense that, it's like they say how, in a study, most people found the idea of getting McDonald's more appealing if it was in a McDonald's bag or a McDonald's designed bag, rather than just some generic brown bag that, you own at home. So we'll just cover similarities and differences because there is so much overlap between the two. And we want to make sure that you're able to distinguish both exercises so that going forward, if you ever want to run a MaxDiff exercise or run conjoint analysis, you can understand which of the two will best fit your needs or will best fit your business objectives. So how are they similar? Well, they're both discrete choice modeling exercises. They're both advanced analytical techniques that are used to gain greater insights into customer preferences, and especially towards other companies or competitor products. Also, respondents are both presented with with a set of attributes or set of items that they need to choose from. They also force trade-offs because these tasks will be repeated. You will see different sets of options that you will find appealing, or in the case of MaxDiff, you can also find unappealing or don't have interest in. And then lastly, too, it simulates how respondents would choose between different subsets of items and concepts. And I think, too, that's the big thing when you're running these exercises, is that you basically want to simulate how you would expect your customers to go to a retail store or go to a physical place or online, and what will determine the factors, what will determine their purchase behavior. Now, how are they different? So again, going back to what I mentioned before, in MaxDiff, you're basically selecting the most and least preferred option, among a list of items that fall under the same category. And whereas with conjoint analysis, basically you're determining how people value different attributes. Respondents are determining what's the best option for them, but it's not an individual item. Instead, it's basically it's a set of attributes that define that item, and that'll allow you to understand what consumers value, because certain attributes or certain factors are going to weigh in more heavily than others. And then also too, from an analysis standpoint, when you're comparing options in conjoint, it is an additive model, meaning that the value of the entire concept is equal to the sum of its parts. So it is very much a sum-zero game, in the sense that certain items or certain combinations of attributes that make an item are going to be liked more than they are disliked, and then the same vice versa. It's basically a sum-zero game. Whereas MaxDiff, it's not an additive model. It can be directly compared because everything is measured on a common scale, and only only levels within attributes get compared, while also a multi-level choice-based conjoint exercise. Whereas conjoint does that, MaxDiff is only rating based on one attribute rather than a set of attributes. So what I'm going to do here is now I'm just going to share my screen and provide you with an example of how these two exercises how to apply these two exercises. In this case, I have a list of possible tourist attractions that folks might be interested in, or locations that folks might be interested in visiting, in 2021 and beyond. Granted that there will be a vaccine out soon enough, of course. And the way I set this up, if I go into settings and the way I set this up, first I'm going to assign the number of attributes per task. So for just general practice sake, you want to have, you only want to have about 2 to 6 attributes per task, because you don't want to tax your participants and you don't want to overwhelm them with too much detail. So you want them to choose what's their most and least favorite option between a handful of items. So I've set it to 5 attributes per task. You can repeat attributes if you like. If you ever want to repeat a set, this helps avoid bias and also further enhances discriminating data. It just basically reveals more significance if you'd like to do that, but that is optional. The total steps, that's the number of tasks that you're going to see. So in this case, I've set this up so that respondents will only see 4 of these exercises at once. And then also too, you can set up maximum attributes, which basically is like among the attributes that are listed out in this question, you can choose and limit the attributes that will be displayed according to the task. And what's cool too about this feature is, like I mentioned, like we have our rich content editor. So if you wanted to, instead of having it say New York City, you wanted a photo of the Empire State Building or a photo of downtown or Times Square or anything like that, we can implement that in there. So it's a little bit more fun, a little bit more intuitive. It's basically a more fun experience. And that would only enhance engagement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to preview this question. And as you can see, I have 5 attributes, and I'm going to go through this 4 times because that's the way I've set it up. So, you know, I've been to Chicago. Granted, Chicago is beautiful, so nobody take any of this personally. I know everybody's from everywhere here. So, so never been in the Appalachian Mountains. Then again, never been to the Rockies either. No, Everglades don't really interest me right now.
You've never been to the Rocky Mountains?
I've never been to the Rocky Mountains. I have been to Boulder though. I have been to Boulder,
What?
but I have not.
Never gone in
beyond
the mountains. Okay, you're missing out.
And then I live in Austin, so, you know. And then this is the conjoint exercise, but we'll get to that later. So that's the kind of exercise that your respondent would go through. And then how do we analyze this? So what we can do is we can go to our main analytics dashboard, and it does give you a frequency of the number of times, counts and frequency that they were selected most and least. But also within our platform is we have different pages that are designated for these different types of analysis. So I'm going to go into MaxDiff analysis here, and then it'll give you a drop-down of all the different MaxDiff questions that you have in the survey in case you have multiple exercises. So I'm going to choose this one, and then it's going to give you a breakdown of next steps. Now, granted, there are multiple responses in this, in this survey, but if I were to look at this and see what my respondent said or what my target market said, let's just say, granted, I work for a service industry or a tourism industry. These percentages reflect, the percentages that were selected as best or as worst, and these will add up to 100. Each of these columns will add up to 100, so you can get a comparison that, people aren't so interested in visiting Boston or Chicago, but they're really interested in going to see the Rockies or New York City or the Appalachian Mountains or the Grand Canyon in comparison. But you're also going to see a lot of polarization. Like, for example, like a lot of people want to go to Florida or Los Angeles, but at the same time, a lot of people are just not that interested. So you're able to take a look at that as well. Also, too, in addition to that, you can run a comparison report. And this basically gives you an overall, think of this like if you're ever doing a bar chart for like a scaled question. But what this does is color code based on the color coding setup on the MaxDiff analysis page. It gives you a report. It gives you an overall comparison of the values that these, from a visual standpoint. And if you have data segments set up already, they'll show you a comparison. Like if you have subgroups, you can get a comparison of what this score, this share of preference score, represents. And this is basically a simulation based on the data that you have that splits, among 100%. What's the most preferred place that your audience will want to go based on the percentages, because they're not going to see every option within a step. They'll only see a handful of these options. So that's the way. So that's the MaxDiff exercise. And now what I'm going to do instead, is go over to conjoint analysis exercise, and now we're going to talk about TV options. So we're going to, say I work, say I work at Sony, and I'm trying to compare the TVs that we sell to our competitors. In this case, LG and Vizio. The way I'm going to set this up initially is what I've done is I've added in my features. These are the different attributes, and then I'm going to assign to a brand, to a cost or price, and then there's going to be an other bucket. And these are here by default. These don't go hand in hand. This is just a custom option. like these are attributes that you customize and include in. And these are all the different levels. Basically, these are the different items or options within a feature type. In the case where, too, in this exercise, say I know that Vizio doesn't sell 65-inch screen TVs, basically what I'm setting up is a prohibited concepts page. And what that does is what it basically does is prohibits any certain combinations from happening in this exercise. So in the case where Vizio doesn't have a 65-inch TV, that won't be presented regardless of price. And the same goes for, like, granted, I don't think any brand out there, there might be a brand out there that does. But if we're comparing price points of $800 to $1,200 to $1,600, there may very well be the case that all three of these brands won't sell a 65-inch TV at a relatively low cost of $800. Again, this is all simulation. So that's what prohibited concepts does. Is basically removes any possible options that just aren't realistic. And then you could also add fixed tasks, which basically allows the administrators to add custom concepts that you're able to compare alongside random options or de-optimal options. So if I go into my settings, or correction, sorry. If I went into design type and decided that, well, first I'm going to make my task count be 4. So we're going to repeat this task 4 different times. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare just 2 concepts. Let's make it simple. And again, like I said, we don't want to tax our participants. We want high quality data. We want this to be an engaging experience for them. We don't want to overwhelm them with too much content. So I'm just going to go into something that I did not mention as well is there are different design types. You can do random design. This is what's provided by default, and it's the most common option. Basically, it displays random samples of all the possible attributes, and the platform will uniquely combine these characteristics, and it'll basically run a concept simulator for you to know what the choices. It'll provide like basically a randomized set, and it's most popular used when working with larger sample sizes, or when you're trying to compare, a high number of features and levels, like 5 to 7 features or 5 to 7 levels. And you can use the simulator to view estimated times as well, to get an understanding of the features that are displayed. So as you can see here, like the approximate number of respondents, you can simulate this to see, okay, how many are going to see what? Because we removed the 65-inch screen option from Vizio, that won't be, it just isn't going to be presented as frequently as other brands to other sizes, especially too when we remove the option of having 65-inch TVs come at the relatively low cost of $800 US. So let's go in and do this exercise. So let's just look at the determining factors. I see Sony and Vizio, same size of TV. I like Vizio, and it's cheaper. So I'm going to click next. And just as a fresh reminder, when it comes to conjoint analysis exercises, you're only selecting which one you prefer the most. Whereas MaxDiff, you're selecting both your most preferred and your least preferred. So now we're in step 2. I see that Sony, they're both brand options. One does cost more. Having said that, I went in wanting to get a real big TV. And if I'm willing to pay $1,200 for a 54-inch, I'm willing to pay $1,500 for a 65-inch. That's my customer decision. As much as I like Sony, LG is providing a bigger TV at a lower cost. So that's going to weigh in heavier to me. And then for the final task, I like Sony. I'd rather spend $800 for a slightly smaller TV than I would for almost double the size or double the price. So that's basically that's the experience that your respondents will go through. And again, going to go back to, oh, wrong button. We're going to go back to analytics. And again, going to go back to this choice modeling dropdown. And then we're going to look at the data among the conjoint analysis. So again, how do you analyze this data? What does this data look like? So similar case where you're going to choose of the conjoint analysis question types presented, you're going to select the question that you want to get analysis on. And this will give you an understanding, a relative importance of attributes between each other. So I see this data, and granted, there have been other responses added prior to this demo. But I see this data, and what I realize now is that the size of the TV is just going to matter more than the price label or the brand logo that you're going to see on that TV. So it gives you, the researcher, a sense that, I think it was premeditated or predetermined that when someone was searching for a TV online or going to a physical store like Best Buy, they knew that they wanted to get a certain size TV. That just matters. That matters more than the price and the brand itself. So that's what this basically reflects. And again, this is a sum zero. Like, this will add up. It basically gives you a poll on what's popular and what's not. And if you notice too, that there's more polarization in the size of the TV versus the price, the price labeling, and the same with brand. So that's sort of the story. That's basically the story. That's basically how you will come up with your findings and understanding, like, what features have the highest value for your customers.
Awesome. Thanks so much, J3. Do you have more to go, or is that?
I do. So I probably have about 10 to 15 more minutes. Again, thank you guys for your time. And we're just going to cover best practices, and then we're going to open the floor to Q&A. So focus on MaxDiff first. Circling back, what are the best practices for MaxDiff? The first one is, make sure to don't overwhelm your respondents. You need to have at least 2 items. 4 is ideal. 4 is like the typical standard, and 6 items is the max. You can have that be your approach, or what you can do is set it up so that each item is presented to respondents at least 3 times. I think the reason I say 3 is that'll be the more items that you have presented on the screen, the more robust the data will be in observing. The more differentiating your results will be. But the reason I say 3 times is you want to have enough opportunity for each of your respondents to compare the same item to different sets of items. And that will allow you to look at your data from a relative standpoint. At the same time, though, when it comes to a certain study, you don't want to rely purely on MaxDiff, let alone just advanced analytics. This is also vital because MaxDiff. What's great about MaxDiff is that it allows you to compare items between each other and provide that relativity. But that's the problem, is that it just provides relativity. You can have a set of items and see the ranking and importance, but that doesn't fully indicate to you that all of these items are good, all of these items are bad. There could be a blend of good and bad items. So that's actually where asking scaled questions or asking binary questions like would you find each of these items useful to you? That's where it would come. That's where asking questions like that to supplement these exercises into play. By asking these types of one-off questions, can get you those binary insights in addition to those relative insights or those ranking insights. And then you'll be able to see, between different items in like products and services that you offer, what's acceptable, what is acceptable versus what is not acceptable. So, you can make the respondent split up the items that they would consider buying or what they would not consider buying, rather than in comparison to this, how does this item make you feel? So you could ask like respondents what they believe in. An example of like questions that you could ask, or you could ask respondents what they believe they're doing the best at versus what companies or brands are doing the worst at. That way brands or companies can better understand where to allocate their energy, or where they need to make improvements, and where they need to put less time or focus on. You can ask what aspects of a brand that they're most satisfied, or what they're least satisfied about. So it gives your product team a better sense of what features that your market will want down the line. You can also ask about brand aspects that your respondents think represent you the best versus the least. And as for conjoint analysis, first best practice is make sure you review all your attributes in levels. You want to make sure to test just options that will contribute to your buyer's decision-making process. So in this case, so like I had shown above, I had removed certain combinations from happening. Like in the case where, say, Vizio doesn't offer a 65-inch TV. Let's definitely cancel that. Let's definitely cancel that option out. And that way it doesn't skew the data. It doesn't give any false impressions, anything like that. And also too, you want to keep it to within 3 or 4 items. Like I mentioned, you don't want to tax your respondents. Their insights are priority 1. And also you want to make sure that the different items are differentiated enough. Like if we're comparing TV sizes, let's compare 42 inches to 54 to 60-inch TV screens, rather than comparing like 58-inch to 60-inch to 62. There's just not enough variance. There's not enough differentiation there. Secondly, make sure to choose your words carefully. You want to use neutral words and avoid bias, because what these exercises do is they basically simulate the purchase decisions that your audiences are going to make. So you want to keep it neutral, because in the same sense, you know that there isn't going to be bias or a lack of neutrality in the decision-making process when your consumers are at a store or when they're shopping online. So you really want to make it reflect how you really want it to reflect real life purchase decision, a purchase decision simulation, I guess you could say. Also too, you'll want to determine the number of respondents that you need. The more combinations that you have, because the number of combinations in a conjoint exercise can vary heavily. And the more combinations you have, the more respondents that you will need. So you can get representation across all the different items, all the different attributes that you're testing. Especially if your intent is to segment data. If going in, you want to compare data among different subgroups or different segments, you'll definitely want to have more than just 300 or 400. 300 and 400 is the minimum, and that's only if you're if you're doing analysis among your total audience. If your intent is to going in to compare different subgroups, you'll want to maybe double that that base size. All right, and then we'll just go into product enhancements real quickly. And so one major product enhancement that we do have set up is anchored MaxDiff. And this goes back to making sure that you supplement, you make sure you supplement your advanced analytical questions with standardized questions, so you get more of a binary sense of items that are valued versus comparing them on a ranked scale. So what anchored MaxDiff analysis does is it's an additional experiment. The purpose is to unveil the absolute importance of an attribute rather than just the relativity. So it basically anchors, what it would do is by setting this up, you can anchor an option. There's a toggle that you can select at the bottom of this question type. And then you can choose the method type. So you can choose between direct binary, first dual response, Then you would specify the question text that you want to, then you can type in the question text so it's personable and it's readable for your audience. Then you want to set up how you want your anchored attributes to be presented. So basically, following up, like in this example, in MaxDiff, you're asking what's their most and least preferred credit cards, and then after that, you want to follow up with them and then ask in like a multi-select question, which of these do you value, or which of these would you not consider purchasing at all? That way you get the binary data along with relative data on a ranking scale. And then, so for this part, the anchored attributes, one piece of advice that I do have is if you have 15 or more attributes, you can customize and randomize and rotate which options are shown to respondents. You can customize by selecting attributes manually, or you can set it up randomly, which basically it speaks for itself. Items are shown randomly to each respondent. And then you can also use rotation. Basically, attributes are iterated with one increment at a time. As far as product enhancements go, we don't have anything for conjoint analysis, but the more you get familiar with the tool, the more you use it. Certainly feel free to let us know and reach out if there are any if you think there's any way that we can enhance our product. Definitely let us know. Yeah, again, thank you for your time, everybody, today. And now we can just open the floor. We'll open the floor up to Q&A.
Great. So we have one question is, how do you determine how many times a task should be repeated for MaxDiff and Conjoint?
Yeah, so typically the magic number is you want to make sure each item is shown to each respondent 3 times. That way you have more than 1 or 2 opportunities to compare items across different ones. Again, that way it helps you better measure relativity, and it also just helps. I mean, it also allows for more granularity, and there's less speculation of what's a more valued item, or what's a more valued attribute, or what's a more valued product or service. Especially when you have a long list of attributes, like if you're comparing sparkling water flavors and you have 20 down the line and you need to filter those down to 5. You want to understand, bottom line, what are going to be the most popular, and how are you going to optimize, how are you going to optimize the products the most. So that's why you want to take those in a given exercise. You do kind of want you do want to make sure that respondents see each item at least 3 times, if not twice.
Awesome.
A lot of that too will depend on the length of the survey. If you're doing, if you're running a smaller study, you might be more inclined to have more of these tasks. Whereas if you're running a large tracker study or like a 15-20 minute study, you don't want to tire out your respondents, because you want quality insights at the end of the day. So that you might have less tasks, or and a lot of it too will depend on the sample size as well.
Great. Okay, so a couple more good questions coming in now. Thanks for that detailed answer. Can raw data from Conjoint be exported for statistical analysis in third-party software, and what does that data look like?
In third-party software, let me go. So we can export both Conjoint and MaxDiff data both in Excel and SPSS. So if you ever needed to import data into SPSS, we can provide that for you in delimited tab files as well. So yes, we can provide those binary splits. And what we'll do is present. It'll include data that presents what was shown as well as what was selected across each of the individual tasks, and each row will be split out by the respondents.
Cool. Okay, and then, oh, I can answer this one. Is anchored MaxDiff feature up yet? It is not, but we are getting really close, and so stay tuned for any for feature announcements around that. I am already planning from like a marketing perspective some big noise that we're going to make around it because it is going to be so useful, and I'm sure John and I will honestly probably do another webinar about it, just about anchored MaxDiff. And so Carlos, that's a great question. It's not live yet, but it will be, so stay tuned. I'm sure we are going to be doing a lot around it, just from a marketing perspective, and I know that we're excited about our customers being able to get their hands on it. Okay, couple more questions. Keep them rolling in, guys. Can you explain how the denominator is calculated for MaxDiff output that you showed? I gotta be honest. Well, I know what it would reflect. It would basically reflect like if all the options were presented based on the data that's provided in terms of what was seen and the probability of being selected, it would reflect a share among 100%, what would be the most preferred among your audience, among all the different options. I know there's a formula, there's a really complex formula that I didn't study that much calculus in college, so I couldn't really provide you those technical terms. But yes, what the share relative importance basically reflects is based on the data that you have, because you'll have your raw percentages of what was most preferred and least preferred. But when you break down and you have them all when you have them all presented, when you have all the items presented together, it does give you that 100% share of what's of relative importance based on that raw data. Okay, awesome. That sounds complicated. Okay, here's another one coming in. Let's say you're in a industry where it's very challenging to obtain a large data set and you have limited respondents. Is there an analysis that would compare to Conjoint with a limited set of respondents? Is there something you could do like Conjoint, but for a smaller data set?
I mean, you could ask more, something that I thought about is maybe you can ask more direct questions, like you can ask like a rank order type or like a drag and drop that basically ask questions like for if you're shopping for TVs, one question that you could directly ask your members is what's the most important factor when deciding on purchasing a TV, whether it's price, the size of your screen, or cost. So that's one way to do it. I do suggest that that's like a question that is also asked in addition to Conjoint. Say that sample size is not an issue, or length of survey is not an issue. Because what's cool with that is that, again, Conjoint and MaxDiff are very similar in the sense that they provide relative scores, or the scoring models show relative importance. But it doesn't really bring full circle whether it is or isn't important. It doesn't give you that binary information. But to go back to that question, you can directly ask them what are the important factors in purchasing a product or a service. You can do that, or also you could also ask like multi-select questions, like which of the following are important attributes to you, or which of the following, or between like a list of 10 attributes, what are your top 3 or what are your top 5?
Okay, so a workaround to Conjoint, if you don't have enough of a large enough data set, would be to ask more complicated questions using multi-select or any of the other ones you mentioned. Right.
The one problem is it won't simulate. It won't provide a simulation of it won't provide that purchase decision-making simulation for your respondents. You're just asking direct questions.
Yeah, you'd have to analyze the data yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, so 2 more questions. Since both techniques result in interval scaled utility scores, which question is preferred by most researchers?
I think that really depends. I think that depends on the business objective. If you have like I think it really just matters between if you have a set of items or a set of products or services that fall under the same umbrella, or like for example, like tourist destinations, they fall under the same umbrella, but you don't want to take all the attributes and factors into consideration. Then in that case, then you would want to do MaxDiff. In the case where you want to get more of an indirect sense of what it is that you're, what products that your customers prefer, in addition to understanding relative importance in the attributes or in the factors that make that product, then you'll want to run a conjoint analysis study.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
MaxDiff is more about differentiating compared to one item. Where does this rank compared to others?
Okay.
Sort of deal.
I got you. That's far more simplistic. I can even understand that. What is the optimal number of responses to derive utility values?
As far as MaxDiff and Conjoint goes, I mean, you definitely want to have a large sample size. Like, you want to make sure that you have about, granted, if you have enough items, you want to have about 300 respondents at least. And that's just if you don't have, you don't have any subgroups that you want to compare or any segments that you want to compare. In order for the data to be consistent and to be significant, or to really reflect customer preferences, I would say you'd want to have at least 300 or 400 respondents.
Awesome. I think that's pretty cool. Here goes one more. When you want to get consumer preferences, which one do you use?
I think again, that really just depends on if you just want to like in the case where you have a whole list of items, but you don't know but you can only sell a certain number of them, and you want to optimize, and you basically want to optimize sales as much as possible. In that case, MaxDiff will be your best bet. Now, if you are in the midst of creating new product lines that offer different services and at different costs, and if you wanted to measure like price elasticity or measure like brand loyalty or anything like that, Conjoint offers more of those complex answers for you. Or sorry, answers those more complex questions for you.
Oh, no, sorry, I was muted. I was trying to speak.
Oh, gotcha.
It wasn't that I was pausing because you weren't done. Cool. Well, that seems like it's all of our questions for today. I want to make sure everybody knows, J3, about the next webinar next month.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Thank you guys again. And yes, our next webinar will be on Thursday, September 24th. And yes, this will be focusing on Van Westendorp and Gabbard-Granger, so pricing techniques. So we'll dive more into the impacts of pricing, because so many businesses may not understand or know for sure if the product or service that they offer is too expensive or too cheap, at least to the minds of their customers. But also too, you can determine price elasticity, and you want to have the ability to interpret all these different dimensions and have a true value for the products and services that you provide, and have that come into full circle. So what are the actual possibilities? when should both techniques, when should either technique be applied? What are the advantages and disadvantages? So that's what I'll be focusing on Thursday, September 24th, and we hope to see you all there.
Woohoo! I'm excited. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate you joining. Oh, and Brian, yes, we will be sending out a copy of the slides and the presentation and all the Q&A in a couple days. So if anybody was wondering. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. We really appreciate you.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody, again.